She said, "A real man would support my career, not question my business trips." I said, "Okay." So I started supporting her in a way she never expected. She found out how supportive I was when a private investigator's report showed up. I, 34M, thought I knew my wife after 8 years of marriage. I was wrong. It started 6 months ago when she landed what she called her dream job at a consulting firm. The pay was decent, but what really excited her were the business trips. Suddenly, she was traveling twice a month to various cities, always with the same team, always staying at expensive hotels. At first, I was genuinely supportive. When she complained about my questions regarding her schedule, I backed off. When she needed new business attire, I handed over my credit card without hesitation. When she said her phone died during trips, and that's why she couldn't call, I bought her a portable charger. But something felt off. She'd returned from these trips glowing, energized in a way I hadn't seen in years. She'd talk about her colleagues constantly, especially her team leader, a guy she described as brilliant and charismatic. She'd mention inside jokes from their dinners, reference conversations I wasn't part of, and laugh at messages on her phone that she'd quickly hide when I walked by. The breaking point came 3 months ago during what should have been a quiet evening at home. I'd made dinner, set the table, even opened a bottle of wine. When I casually asked about her upcoming trip to Chicago, her entire demeanor shifted. She accused me of being controlling, said I was trying to sabotage her career, and delivered the line that would change everything. A real man would support my career, not question my business trips. I looked at her across our dining table, this woman I'd built a life with, and simply said okay. But I meant okay in a way she never expected. The next morning, I made some calls. My college roommate had become a private investigator after his stint in the military, and we'd kept in touch over the years. I explained the situation, transferred $5,000, and asked him to find out exactly what kind of support my wife's career really needed. What I discovered over the next 2 months shattered everything I thought I knew about our marriage. The consulting firm was real. Her job was real. But those business trips? Half of them were fabricated. The team leaders she couldn't stop talking about? They'd been having an affair for 4 months. The expensive hotels? They were splitting rooms, charging everything to fake expense accounts that she'd been manipulating through her position in accounting. My private investigator friend was thorough. He had photos, receipts, phone records, and even testimony from a hotel clerk who recognized them as regulars. They'd been careful, but not careful enough to fool a professional. The most damning evidence was a series of text messages my friend had retrieved from her cloud backup. Messages where she called me boring, complained about our sex life, and made plans to eventually leave me once she figured out how to keep the house and split our assets favorably. But the real kicker? She'd been using our joint credit card to buy gifts for him. Expensive cologne, designer clothes, even a watch that cost more than my monthly salary. All items I'd assumed were for client entertainment or professional networking. I sat in my friend's office, staring at photographs of my wife and her lover entering hotels together, and felt something cold settle in my chest. Not heartbreak, that would come later. This was pure, calculating anger. I thanked my friend, paid his remaining fee, and asked him to prepare a comprehensive report with all findings, properly documented and legally admissible. Then I went home and began the most difficult performance of my life. For the next month, I became the most supportive husband imaginable. When she announced another business trip, I packed her bags. When she needed dry cleaning, I handled it personally. When she mentioned wanting to redecorate our bedroom, I enthusiastically agreed and suggested she pick out everything herself. What she didn't know was that I was documenting everything. Every expense, every lie about her whereabouts, every time she claimed to be working late but was actually at his apartment. I was building a case, and she was helping me do it. I also started making some changes of my own. I opened a separate bank account and began transferring money systematically, always amounts that wouldn't trigger her attention. I made copies of all important documents. I even started recording our conversations, keeping detailed notes about her lies and contradictions. The hardest part wasn't the deception, it was watching her lie to my face every single day and pretending I believed her. She'd come home from her fake business trips and tell me elaborate stories about client meetings that never happened, restaurants she'd never visited, and colleagues who didn't exist. All while wearing clothes I'd unknowingly paid for, bought for another man. 3 weeks ago, she announced another trip. This one was supposedly to Seattle, a big client presentation that could secure her promotion. She was particularly excited, spent hours shopping for the perfect outfit, and kept talking about how this trip could change everything for her career. I helped her pack, drove her to the airport, and kissed her goodbye like any loving husband would. What she didn't know was that my private investigator friend was already in position at the boutique hotel where she and her lover were actually spending their romantic weekend. Not in Seattle, but just 2 hours away in a different city entirely. While she was gone, I made my final preparations. I contacted a divorce attorney, transferred the remaining funds from our joint accounts into my personal account, and prepared to file papers. I also did something else. I arranged for a very special delivery. Update 1. She returned from her fake Seattle trip on Sunday afternoon, glowing with what she claimed was the success of her presentation. She'd brought me back a coffee mug from Pike Place Market. A nice touch, except Pike Place Market was nowhere near where she'd actually been. I thanked her for the thoughtful gift and told her I had a surprise for her too. Monday morning, while she was getting ready for work, the doorbell rang. I answered it while she was in the shower, signed for the large envelope, and left it on the kitchen counter next to her coffee. She came downstairs in her professional attire, grabbed her coffee, and noticed the envelope. She asked who it was from, and I told her it looked like something for her career, maybe a congratulations from her company for the successful Seattle presentation. The look on her face when she opened that envelope and saw the private investigator's report will stay with me forever. Color drained from her cheeks as she flipped through photographs of herself and her lover entering hotels, copies of their text messages, and detailed documentation of every lie she'd told me over the past 4 months. Her hands started shaking around page 3 when she reached the financial records showing exactly how much of our money she'd spent on her affair. By page 10, which detailed their weekend getaway while she was supposedly in Seattle for business, she was sitting down. She tried to speak several times, but couldn't seem to form words. Finally, she managed to ask where I got this information. I told her that a real man supports his wife's career by making sure she's being honest about it. I explained that I'd been supporting her for months, supporting her right into the hands of a private investigator who documented everything she'd been hiding. She started crying then, but not the way someone cries when they're sorry. It was angry crying, frustrated crying, the crying of someone who'd been caught and was furious about it. She accused me of violating her privacy, of being paranoid and controlling. She said I destroyed any chance of working things out by hiring someone to spy on her. She claimed the affair meant nothing, that she was planning to end it anyway, that she'd never intended for things to go so far. I listened to all of this while sipping my coffee, then told her about the divorce papers I'd be filing that afternoon. I explained how her documented infidelity would affect property division in our state, how her misuse of joint funds constituted financial fraud, and how her employer might be interested to know about the falsified expense reports. That's when the angry crying turned into panic. Update 2. The last 2 weeks have been a whirlwind of legal meetings, document reviews, and the slow dismantling of our shared life. She tried every approach possible: tears, anger, bargaining, threats, but the evidence was overwhelming and professionally documented. Her affair partner, it turned out, was married too. My private investigator had been thorough enough to identify him and, as a courtesy, had prepared a separate report for his wife. I wasn't vindictive enough to deliver it personally, but I did make sure she received the information she deserved to have. My wife's attempts to salvage the situation became increasingly desperate. She offered to quit her job, to never see him again, to go to counseling. She promised to pay back every dollar she'd spent on him, though we both knew her salary couldn't cover the designer clothes and expensive gifts she'd charged to our credit cards. The most surreal moment came when she tried to turn the situation around, claiming that my hiring a private investigator was just as much a betrayal as her affair. She argued that instead of talking to her about my suspicions, I'd chosen to deceive her by pretending to be supportive while gathering evidence behind her back. I reminded her that she'd specifically told me a real man would support her career without questioning her business trips. I explained that I'd simply taken her advice and found a way to be supportive that actually revealed the truth about her career activities. Her response was to throw the coffee mug from fake Seattle at the wall. The divorce proceedings moved quickly thanks to the documented evidence of adultery and financial misconduct. Her lawyer tried to argue for reconciliation, for mediation, for anything that might salvage her position, but the photographs and financial records spoke louder than any emotional appeals. What surprised me most was how many people had suspected something but hadn't wanted to get involved. Our neighbor mentioned seeing her leave with suitcases on days when I thought she was working late at the office. My brother admitted he'd always found her business trip stories oddly detailed and rehearsed. Even her sister called to apologize for not saying anything sooner about the changes she'd noticed in her behavior. The final irony came last week when she lost her job. The company investigation into her expense account manipulation had concluded, and they'd terminated her employment immediately. Her affair partner was also fired, and both of them were facing potential criminal charges for the financial fraud they'd committed. She moved in with her mother and tried one last time to convince me to give her another chance. She claimed that losing her job, her relationship, and our marriage had taught her what really mattered. She promised to spend the rest of her life making it up to me if I'd just consider reconciliation. I told her I appreciated the offer, but that I was already committed to supporting someone else's career now, my own. Update 3. Yesterday, exactly 6 months after she told me a real man would support her career without questions, the divorce was finalized. She received significantly less than she would have gotten in a no-fault divorce, thanks to the documented adultery and financial misconduct. The house remained mine, along with most of our assets, and she was ordered to pay restitution for the money she'd stolen from our joint accounts. Her affair partner's wife had also filed for divorce, and the two people who'd thought they were so clever in their deception found themselves both single, both unemployed, and both facing potential criminal charges. They tried to maintain their relationship for a few weeks after everything came to light, but apparently the stress of legal troubles and public humiliation wasn't as romantic as sneaking around had been. The most satisfying moment came during the final divorce hearing when her lawyer asked if I'd consider a statement about the marriage having positive aspects worth preserving. The judge looked at the private investigator's report, the financial documents, and the evidence of systematic deception, then asked me directly if I wanted to make any statement about reconciliation. I told the court that I'd learned the importance of truly supporting my spouse's career by ensuring complete transparency about all professional activities. I explained that I believed everyone deserved a partner who would investigate thoroughly enough to provide that level of support, and that I looked forward to finding someone whose career I could support with complete honesty on both sides. The judge seemed to appreciate the irony and granted the divorce with the property distribution I'd requested. She tried to approach me in the parking lot afterward, but I'd already moved on. Not just legally, but emotionally. The woman who'd accused me of not being a real man had taught me something valuable about what real support actually looks like in a marriage. It looks like honesty, transparency, and the courage to seek truth even when it's difficult to find. I still have the coffee mug from Pike Place Market, the one she brought back from the Seattle trip she never took. It sits on my kitchen counter as a reminder that supporting someone means caring enough about them to know the truth about their life, even when that truth is something they're desperately trying to hide. Sometimes the most supportive thing you can do for someone is help them face the consequences of their choices. She'd wanted a real man who would support her career without asking questions, and in the end, she got exactly what she'd asked for, just not in the way she'd expected. The private investigator bill was worth every penny.